Welcome to Joyfully Unstoppable, the podcast for women who are ready to succeed without the stress. Whether you are leading a team, a classroom, a boardroom, or your own big, beautiful life, I am so glad you found us. I'm your host, Becky Hamm, executive coach, speaker, and founder of Women Lead Well. Join me each week for straight talk, practical tips, and a dash of encouragement. Hello, friend. I hope you are having a great day. Today, we are going to talk about the challenge that comes up often with clients in my coaching practice, as well as inside the Women's Executive Leadership Lab, my membership program. You delegated the work, you explained the assignment or the task or the project or the program, you gave it to somebody capable, and then the questions started rolling in. Can you review this? What should I do next? I'm not sure about. What do you think? Who needs to approve blank? Is this what you had in mind? Before long, you're monitoring progress, answering all the questions, correcting decisions, and stepping in as the deadline approaches. The work may be delegated, but you remain responsible for moving it forward and getting it done. When this happens repeatedly, leaders often conclude that their employees lack initiative, refuse to take ownership of their work, and need closer supervision. Capable people frequently wait for direction when the team lacks the structure required for both accountability and ownership. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you create those systems to foster accountability and ownership in your team? And when I'm talking about accountability, what I mean is that accountability can only grow when people know what is theirs to do. Ownership can only grow. People can only take ownership of their work when they've got the authority, the judgment, and the support to actually bring that work to completion. And so today on the podcast, we're going to talk about 5 leadership systems that help you build both. And by the end of this podcast, you're going to know which system your team needs first and how to begin strengthening it this week. All right. So let's talk about what accountability and ownership look like. We're going to define those 2 concepts in practical terms. And so when I'm talking about accountability, I mean that people understand what they are responsible for achieving, that they follow through on their commitments, that they communicate progress consistently. You don't have to hound them to get updates, that they raise risks and obstacles early, that they're clear in how they communicate problems or potential problems. They take responsibility for the quality of the result, and they address missed expectations directly. They don't hide from them, and they don't try to hide them from you. Ownership. When I'm talking about ownership, I mean that people exercise judgment within their authority. So we're going to talk about you clarifying authority in this episode. We deal with ambiguous authority all the time, but if you can clarify authority, man, do it. Do it for your team because it makes it easier for them to then exercise judgment and take responsibility. Ownership means taking initiative when the situation requires it or benefits from it, solving problems instead of escalating them, developing recommendations. So they come to you with recommendations, not just problems, considering the broader impact of their decisions, remaining engaged until the outcome is achieved, not just reaching the point where they're frustrated or it's hard and then dropping it at your feet. Nay. Ownership is they continue on until the job is done. Both outcomes, both accountability and ownership, depend on clear leadership systems. That's why we're talking about systems in today's episode. And a leadership system, what I mean by that, is that it is a clear, repeatable way for the team to establish its priorities, to make decisions, solve problems, communicate progress, follow through on commitments. All of that should be second nature to the team. And it might not be today, but we're going to put those processes in place, those systems in place today on the episode so you can carry that forward and make it second nature so that people aren't wasting time and energy trying to figure out, what do I do? You want your team to always know what to do in every circumstance so they can focus on the job at hand. And so those leadership systems, they put those shared expectations for accountability and ownership into team practice. So your team, your employees, they know what matters, they know what authority they have, they know when to involve you as the leader. And importantly, they know how success is going to be evaluated. And so accountability creates clarity about responsibility, right? Accountability gives you clarity about responsibility. Ownership is what turns that responsibility into action. And so I want to say one more thing before we start diving in, and that is these systems that lay all of this out so everybody is clear about what's theirs to do and what comes next and when to report and how to report, all of that sounds boring. Yeah, that's the whole point. Your leadership, those systems, that framework, that structure for the work that gets done within your part of your organization should be boring. It should be. There should not be chaos at the systems level. It should be clear, widely understood, and repeatable. That's what we're talking about today. We are taking the chaos out of the how to get it done because the actual work itself is going to produce chaos. And if at the end of this episode that still isn't clear to you, shoot me a DM. I'm at Women Lead Well across all social platforms, and let's talk about it. I would love to just have a conversation with you. This is also something that we talk about consistently inside the Women's Executive Leadership Lab, and so that might also be a place where you would like to connect with other amazing women at your level and troubleshoot these ideas collaboratively in a safe, private environment. All right, so let's start with our first system, which is getting crystal clear on the outcome. A lot of time, ownership and accountability problems begin when a leader assigns a task or responsibility without defining the desired result. And so to put this a different way, a lot of performance problems begin as clarity problems. They begin as communication problems. And so let me give an example. You might ask a member of your team to prepare the board presentation. That's the task. That's what you want them to do. But the employee still needs to understand what's the purpose of the presentation, what's the goal or the outcome, what should the presentation accomplish, who is the audience? The board, duh. But what is this we are providing new information to a cold audience. We are providing context to a warm audience, right? So you need to give a little more, even if the audience is identified as the person, how are they coming to the presentation? Because that's going to change what you include inside the presentation. What should the audience understand or be prepared to decide by the end of the presentation? What would make the final product successful and who gets to determine success? And then, obviously, what are the milestones and the final deadline? Okay, those are and it's just a prepare slide deck. But that's all the implicit knowledge that somebody needs in order to do that effectively. And if it's somebody who is more junior, more new to the organization, more new to your team, they might not come with all of that implicit knowledge. And so here is a 4-step system framework that you can use to create that clarity. Number 1, outcome. What needs to be true when the work is complete? What are you driving for? Are they informed? They've made the decision. They have the background. I'm going back to the prepare the slide deck, the brief. But whatever the task is that you're assigning, what's that desired outcome? 2, purpose. Why does this work matter to the team or the organization? So the what is it? What's the outcome we're driving toward? Why are we doing this? What's the what? 3, the success criteria. How will the quality of the result be evaluated and by whom? And then constraints. What are the deadlines? What are the policies, the resources, boundaries? All of that should be clear to the individual. So to come with this board presentation example, you would tell your team members something like, please prepare the board presentation for next month. The goal is to give the board enough confidence in our financial plan that they can approve next year's budget at the meeting. The presentation should clearly explain our 3 investment priorities, the expected return on investment, and the risks that we have already accounted for. Send me an outline by Friday so we can confirm the overall direction. That's your first milestone, right? Just saying that to the employee, they now have enough context to make informed choices as they develop the project. You would say this to the individual verbally, potentially in a one-to-one or a group meeting. I always recommend with something like this, follow up in an email so that they can go back and actually see in black and white what it is that you expect of them. And so I would say, before assigning your next important responsibility, ask yourself, what does this person need to understand to make sound decisions without repeatedly checking in with me? And provide that context in the initial conversation. And now for those of you who are inside the Women's Executive Leadership Lab, you know that in our module, we have a content library with a bunch of different videos and resources on a whole host of topics related to executive level leadership. And we have an entire module on building ownership in teams. How do you build it? How do you sustain it? How do you troubleshoot when it starts to break down? And there is a 2-page handout that helps you walk through how do you hand off tasks and projects to team members in a way that supports their ownership and accountability? And so if something like that, if a template, the handout, that the video content would be valuable to you, I would encourage you to check out the Women's Executive Leadership Lab. It is a phenomenal community of amazing women. Link is in the show notes below, and I would love to see you inside. System number 2, defining decision rights. And so this is where you want to make sure that employees know what decisions they have the authority to make, what decisions you expect them to make. You might ask a member of your team to take ownership while continuing to review or reverse that person's decisions. And after a while, the employee is going to learn that it is safer to seek your approval, to not show the initiative and not make the decisions. And so I work with clients on establishing 3 levels of decision authority. Level 1 is decide and act. The employee has the authority to make the decision and move forward. They don't have to talk to you about it. They don't have to tell you ahead of time that they're going to make the decision. They make the decision, they carry it out, and then they provide an update at their next scheduled check-in. So they back brief you on it, but they ain't asking your permission for it. That's level 1. Level 2 is recommend and consult. And so here, the employee evaluates the situation, they come up with a recommendation, and they consult you before taking action. And again, they're not necessarily asking your permission, but they're just saying like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I would love your insight. And so you're not there to veto the decision, but you are there to weigh in with your context at a more senior level. Maybe you understand some of the resourcing implications or stakeholder considerations to best inform that judgment. It is still your team members, your employees' decision to make, but you are consulting on the decision with them. Ball is in their court. You are helping to inform and strengthen the decision that they will ultimately make. And then finally, level 3, these are decisions that are still yours to make. And so these are things that your team member, your employer are going to bring to you for your decision. And so that could be that a particular issue involves significant risk. It involves significant resources, and you'll identify them with your team member what that threshold is. It engages policy or some sort of regulatory requirement. It has organizational impact. I would encourage you, in the strongest possible terms, to define what types of decisions fall within each level and communicate that to the individual members of your team, recognizing that decision authority can grow as individual team members develop their experience and demonstrate sound judgment. And so what you might have as a decision that you make with one employee on a particular project, you might let another individual on a similar project run the ball and make the decisions and just back brief you because that other individual just has greater experience or has a track record of sound judgment already. So you don't need to make that decision for them. They can make it reliably. Whereas someone who's more junior or newer or who just is learning to take ownership, you might do that collaboratively, or you might hold decision-making authority for a certain thing. And so let me give you an example of what this might look like. You could tell your team member, you can resolve customer concerns involving less than $500 or whatever, $5,000, $50,000, whatever that threshold is that's appropriate for the individual. Please document your decision and then update me during our weekly meeting. Bring any larger concerns or anything above that threshold to me with your recommended course of action. You always want your team member to bring you their recommendations, even when you are the decision maker, because you're cultivating your judgment by having them do that. And then when you make the decision, you can have a conversation about their reasoning with the recommendation that they bring to you, and you help to further refine their judgment when you do. So as you're building this system, I would invite you to think about one category of decisions that your team brings to you repeatedly. Maybe it's reviewing drafts. Maybe it's helping to finalize a focus or identify priorities or make resource allocation decisions, whatever it is. What constantly ends up in your workflow that they should be able to take care of on their own? Decide the level of authority that it belongs to, and then apply that and communicate it clearly. Build that system, make it repeatable over time. And again, it might be tailored to the person, but if it could be broadly shared so that everyone at a particular level, everyone in a particular role has the same decision authority, yay. That just makes things clearer for everybody. All right, system number 3. You want to do this with respect to problem solving. So you want to build a problem solving pathway, routine, framework. And you want to do this because there is a chance that you have trained your employee to bring you their problems. If your employee comes to you with a, what should I do? I don't know what to do, boss. If you provide the answer because it's efficient, right? It's faster for you just to tell them what to do than to have them figure it out themselves. And because you know the answer, you know what they should do. And because your answers are strong answers, right? That's great in the short term. You have solved the problem in the short term and they can move forward with implementation. But the problem with that approach is that the employee, the team member, comes to you with their next question and their next question and their next question. You're not building their judgment, their capacity to handle independent challenges on their own. And so instead, let's talk about a system for how you solve this problem. Before escalating an issue to you, before bringing you a challenge, I would ask your employees, your team members, to prepare 5 things. 1, what's happening? Like, what's the issue? What's the problem? What's the challenge? 2, why does it matter? Like, what's the significance of it? 3, what options have you already considered or tried? What have you done to try to solve this problem? 4, what do you recommend? So what team member, employee, what is your recommendation for the next step here? And then 5, what support, what decision do you need? None of that is you accepting responsibility for the decision, you accepting responsibility to solve the problem. All of that keeps the problem in the team member's lane. The ball is in their court, right? They are still responsible for finding the solution, but you are helping them clarify the problem, bring recommendations for the next step, and identify what they need for that next step to be successful. And then you, as the leader, then you ask them questions to help strengthen their reasoning. You ask them things like, what outcome are you trying to create? What information do you already have? Like, what information are you that's just unavailable to you, right? Decision ambiguity is real. And so understanding where the ambiguity is helpful as you evaluate risk when you make different decisions. What options have you considered? What do you recommend? Speaking of risk, like, what risks should we be accounting for? And then I love this one because it is a clear, I ain't doing this for you, bub. What decision would you make if I weren't here? Right? So you have that conversation where they are laying it all out for you. And you say, okay, well, what would you do if I weren't here? Probably they would go with the recommendation that they were making. And so you can have a conversation about the strengths and weaknesses of those recommendations. If you are dissatisfied with the recommendation that they're making, don't just jump on it and poo-poo it. You might ask questions like, well, what's another way to think about this? What are some other options that we haven't explored yet? Right? You're not telling them you suck. Like, your ideas are bad, because that's not going to help them. Even if the ideas are objectively bad, you want to ask questions that get them thinking toward the solution that you would provide if you were to actually answer the question for them. And again, the more junior someone is, the more you might kind of lead the witness on this. The more senior someone is, the more free rein you might want to give them to wander in the wilderness to figure it out on their own. Bottom line is the same, though. The employee remains responsible for the problem-solving process. And so that's your quick win. That's what I would say. The next time somebody walks into your office and asks, "What do I do?" Respond with, "Well, walk me through what you've considered. Tell me what you recommend. Listen to the reasoning." And then through questioning, through that coaching approach, you can give your perspective. But don't ever accept responsibility for the problem back. The ball stays in their court. Every problem your team brings you is an opportunity to develop the person who brought it to you. And you're still going to get it resolved, right? You're not going to let it fail. But the road that you take to resolving the question or the challenge or the problem is just different. All right, let's take a second here and let's talk about communication flows. Oh, I want to do this for a couple of reasons. One, communication is a system, and you want the system to run regularly and repeatedly. Again, no chaos at the system level, because life's going to give you enough chaos already. Systems should be regular, routine, and a little bit boring. What happens inside the system's never boring, but the systems themselves should be a little boring. And I would hazard a guess that people pop in and disrupt your workflow on the regular. That tells me that your communication system has some room to optimize. If people are consistently interrupting you because they don't have a clearly identified next opportunity to communicate with you, to ask their question, raise the concern, receive a decision, whatever it is, then you're going to get the pop-ups, right? The pop-by. And now that more of us are back in the office, those drive-bys are just more common. Ugh. And even if they happen over Slack or other communication channels, that Slack notification popping off is going to disrupt your concentration, right? So even if they don't physically come by your office, it can be super disruptive to you and the work that only you can do at your level. So let's talk about a predictable communication cadence system that creates reliable access to you and gives each type of conversation an appropriate place to go. And so a pretty straightforward one might be, you might have weekly one-on-one meetings for priorities, decisions, development. Depending on how many direct reports you have and your other schedule, those meetings might be every other week. But whatever cadence you have that works for you, that is the one-to-one. That's where you do the regular feedback and updates. You might have a group brief team meeting for coordination and emerging risks. Don't do updates in a team meeting. That goes in an email. Don't ever do updates at a team meeting. The team meeting is for collaboration, for the work that only the group can do together. Keep it focused on that. Keep it impactful. I promise you'll have greater payoff. It could be that there are written project updates at agreed milestones. Remember, we talked about the brief to the board. I want to see your outline by Friday. So that would be a written project update that would come to you on Friday that you could then give written feedback on. And you might discuss it in your weekly one-on-one or not, depends on what works best. And then in addition to that, then there is the break glass, knock on my door, send me a Slack. You want to clearly identify escalation rules for the urgent issues. So for the decision-making example, you can resolve customer disputes $500 and less. Well, okay, if it's more than $500, you got to bring it to me. Don't wait a week to bring me a customer dispute, right? You bring it to me. You might have rules about escalating stakeholder challenges, or if you are in a role that deals with boards, anything related to board members and friction with board members, anything that is public facing. And so if there's something that's going on that is communicated outside of the organization, you might want that to come to you. You figure it out. The point is, you communicate those rules very clearly with your team so that they know what they are. And then you want to clarify what information belongs in each channel, right? If it is a routine questions about a project or a task, well, that can go in the one-to-ones. Or if you have your team send you a weekly roll-up of this is what I did over the week, or if you report that in an email, way better than reporting it in your team meeting, then they can put those questions in that email or that message, however it comes to you. Project updates can be communicated through those written updates. Risks that break a particular threshold should be raised as they're identified. That's why people knock on the door. That's why people send you the Slack. If it's a high stakes decision, well, then you might want to have a dedicated discussion with them about it, right? When it comes to your one-on-ones, if it's weekly, if it's biweekly, whatever it is, developing a consistent agenda for those conversations. So you start by touching on current priorities. Then your team member tells you what decisions they need from you, if they need any decisions from you, or they brief back any decisions that they have made, or they tee up a decision where you are consulting, right? So they give you what you need so you can provide your consultation, then they make their decision. Any risks or obstacles. Your job as a leader is to Hulk smash when things get in your team members' way. And so they raise those for you during those one-to-ones. And you want to ask your employee, not you, your employee is responsible for maintaining that agenda and adding topics throughout the week, right? Because it's their work. They got to own their work. You got to own your work in your career. They got to own their work in their career. So you can still, and I would encourage you to come up with a shared agenda that you use with all of your team members. You have the template for it. And then you ask your employees to personalize the agenda to their work. So they bring the priorities, the decisions, the obstacles that they want to discuss with you, put it on a shared drive somewhere. And then before the one-to-one, you go and you look at what's on there. And again, there are things that will rise to the level of immediate communication. But if you can clearly identify what work or what decisions, what tasks are communicated where in the overall system of communication within your team, it will help everyone to feel more confident that they know that their questions are going to be answered, or that you're going to kick the questions right back to them and they're going to answer them. But at least that touch point is going to happen, and that they don't need to be knocking on your door because they don't know when they're going to be able to get feedback from you. You make it clear, boring, routine. And this leads into system number 5 of creating shared accountability. And this is why you want to keep as much of the work, as much of the responsibility in your team members than you. Because if you are the only one tracking the commitments, if you remember the deadlines and you are requesting the updates, so you're going to them for an update, if you're the one who notices that there's a delay on something or remind employees of what they've agreed to do, well, your team might still complete the work, but you are going to maintain responsibility for follow-through. And that is not accountability. It does not build ownership. And it does not let you focus where you need to be focusing in your role. You're focusing where your team needs to be focusing. And that's different. So a shared accountability system gives the whole team visibility into who owns each outcome, what has been done, when the work is due, what progress has been made, what obstacles need attention, what result was achieved. And you can do this. This system, this lends itself to a project management platform. And so I love Trello. If you work with Microsoft Teams has a great projects platform. I assume Google does too, but I haven't really used any project management. A lot of people use Asana. Whatever it is that you use, having that system set up so at a glance people can see what you're driving for and who owns what piece of it. And then the person who owns the piece of it is responsible for keeping it updated. This, if you use it, if you drive people into it so they maintain their piece of it, it will help improve both accountability and ownership. And then when you come to your meetings, either your one-on-ones or team meetings, you want to identify in the meeting for every single thing you talk about, who is the owner, what is the outcome, and what is the deadline. And then the individual owners record and manage their own commitments in the project management system. Does that make sense? So it's not you identifying who owns and what the deadline is and you chasing after that person for the deadline. No, that does not build ownership, and that is not that person being accountable. Your team member does it. You set the expectations. And you be mindful of it. So in your one-on-ones, you can say, hey, I noticed that you didn't update such and such. Why is that? Or, why aren't you taking ownership of this thing? And you can have the conversation about it. But you don't just absorb that responsibility. You keep it at your team member. Your team member is responsible for it, and you're holding them accountable. And then once you complete a project or you complete a big task, not like a small little task, But you want to ask yourself, you do the after action review. What did we intend to accomplish? What happened? Like, what did we actually accomplish? What worked well? What should we improve next time? What do we want to continue to do that sustains and improves? And again, you have this conversation with members of your team, but your team is the one that answers the questions. And you will quickly identify if there is a big disconnect between how you would have answered those questions and how your team answers those questions. Well, that's a great opportunity for a conversation, because that means that still there's something that's not clear. The expectations aren't clear. And so you want to clarify that. So the next time another project comes up, you are honing in. They are starting to see more clearly what right looks like and what they are driving toward on any of these projects. They will start to understand you better and your expectations. And this is how you're going to reinforce these systems over time to make them consistent. Because it's one thing for me to tell you all this in a podcast episode, and for me to recommend how you start to implement. But habits are hard to change, and you might have a habit in your part of the organization with your team of you owning a lot of stuff that your team should own, and you allowing your team members not to accept accountability for work that they should be accountable for. And so you reinforce the accountability and ownership when you respond to problems by asking for their recommendations, when you honor their decision authority. If you have delegated decision authority, you don't jump in and second guess or undermine or revise the decision. You let it hold. When you address missed commitments directly, not in an accusing, shaming way, but in a, we got to get this right way, right? When you recognize initiative and sound judgment, you reinforce the behavior you want to see more of. When you provide context, when you coach employees through unfamiliar situations, coach them through solving their own problems, when you allow your employees to learn from mistakes, because they're going to make them, and that happens. There's a difference between a mistake and being negligent. And when you use your systems consistently, so people start to expect them, when they start to feel comfortable and safe in them, when they can rely on them, that builds accountability. It builds ownership. You weaken the system when you bypass it, when you take decisions back, when you solve problems that belong with a member of your team. If you give your leaders those strong systems, if you invest in strengthening your systems, then you are creating the capacity. Team accountability and ownership don't just magically fall from the sky because you tell people they need to take more initiative. They grow through the conditions that you create. Those are those systems. Clarify the outcome, define decision rights, establish a problem-solving pathway, create a predictable communication cadence, make accountability a shared team practice, and then reinforce those systems through the way you lead every single day. Your team gains the clarity and authority required to exercise good judgment. You gain the capacity to focus on the work that only you can do. Now, if this episode spoke to you, I would love for you to share it with a friend. We need more women leading from alignment, not adrenaline. And if you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. Remember, joyful, sustainable, and authentic leadership is possible, and you deserve to enjoy every minute of it. Until next time, I'm Becky Hamm, and this is Joyfully Unstoppable.